Welcome back to Accessible Gourmet. Today we're making tie-dyed dumplings with a pork and chive filling. Let's start with the chili oil. In a small saucepan, add 2 cups of oil, 5 pods of star anise, 1 cinnamon stick, 2 bay leaves, 3 tablespoons of Szechuan peppercorn, and 5 cardamom pods. We're going to simmer this on the stove for about an hour. Add 1 1/4 cup of chili flakes to a heat-proof bowl or vessel of your choice. To this, we're going to finely mince 1 shallot and add it to the chili flakes. Then 2 teaspoons of salt and 3 cloves of finely minced garlic. Set this aside until our oil is ready to add. Now let's move on to the dye for our doughs. So I'm using 2 beets here that I got in my farm share box, and it was kind of a surprise because I didn't expect the second one to be that rainbowy color. But we're going to peel these, each of these beets, and then cube them. We want them all pretty much a uniform size so that they all cook evenly. Wear gloves if you don't want your hands dyed. I don't mind so much. Just look at that color, it's absolutely beautiful. Nature is pretty freaking amazing. Anyway, we're going to continue to dice these into little cubes. Add them to a saucepan. Add enough water to just cover them. We're going to cook these on the stove until they're fork tender. Next, we're going to move on to the green portion of our dye. I'm just taking a bunch of spinach, using about 1.5 cups. Adding it to my blender, adding some water, and blending this up. If you're using a Vitamix, I do recommend that you leave the lid on while you're using the plunger part, or this will happen. I made a huge mess. It was all over my glasses, all over the camera, all over myself. It was quite something. So yeah, definitely leave the lid on the top while you're using the plunger. We just want to puree this until there are no large chunks left, and then we're going to strain it into a bowl because we don't want any of the solids in there. We just want that lovely green liquid that's left behind. Once the beets are ready, we're going to add these as well as all of the water that was in cooking with the beets into our blender. Puree this, repeat the process of straining into a small bowl, and set it aside. Now that our oil has been simmering for about an hour, we want to take it off the stove and remove as many of the spices as we can, especially the cinnamon stick, the cardamom, etc. I don't mind if there's still some Szechuan peppercorns in there. They lend a different numbing heat as opposed to the heat of the chili flakes. So we're going to carefully ladle our oil into our chili flake shallot garlic mix. This is going to bubble. We're essentially flash frying these things. So just be careful and go slowly. And don't get nervous. Just wait till the bubbles subside a little bit and then keep adding your oil. This will keep in the fridge for about a month. I tend to use chili oil in a lot of my recipes, so this will go a lot faster for me. Once all your oil is added, you want to take a fork or a spoon and carefully go in there and stir everything so that the oil is all the way to the bottom of the chili flakes. So for our dumpling wrappers, we're taking 3 cups of all-purpose flour, and we're adding about a cup of boiling water while we're stirring. This is going to activate the glutens and give you a little bit more of an elastic dough. I mix with chopsticks at first because it is hot, but once it's cool enough for me to get my hand in there, I'll go in and mix it by hand. I'm not adding as much of the boiling water as I would normally because we're going to be adding extra water when we add our liquid dyes in. So keep mixing this until you get a shaggy but elastic dough. Also add about a teaspoon of salt. Once it's a little shaggy, we're gonna turn this out onto our bench and add a 1/4 cup of cold water. And then we're gonna just mix this through until our dough just comes together. I'm separating these into 2 smaller portions of dough as well as a larger portion of dough, since I want one to be red and one to be green. I was going to leave the larger portion white, but I decided to dye all of it. So in one of the smaller portions, we're going to add about 2.5 tablespoons of our spinach juice and just start kneading that color into our dough. Add more juice if you want a more intense color. If your dough is sticky, just add some more flour. I'm just pulling from the larger portion of dough that I set aside that I thought I was going to keep white. But yeah, just start kneading the color in until you get a color that you love and until the dough is nice and elastic, and then we'll set this aside in a bowl. I did eventually move these to plastic bags or plastic wrap just so the dough would stay moist. Repeat this process with the second batch of small dough with the beet juice. Again, if you don't want to stain your hands, definitely wear gloves. It does tend to get a little bit messy, but the end result looks like this. And we just want to cover this and let it rest for about 15 to 20 minutes. Finally, we're on to the filling of our dumplings. So I just took 4 shiitake mushrooms. I rehydrated them in boiling water and let them sit for about an hour. So we're going to finely dice these and add these to about a pound of ground pork. Next up, I'm taking a handful of chives, finely dicing those and adding them to the mixture as well. Then we're adding 4 scallions, finely dice these up. We also need 2 cloves of finely minced garlic and about an inch-long piece of finely minced ginger. And we're going to add this to our pork mixture. Now onto the seasoning. I'm adding 2 tablespoons of sake. If you don't drink alcohol, you can leave this step out. 2 tablespoons of soy sauce, 1 teaspoon of toasted sesame oil, and some salt and pepper. We really want to mix this into almost a paste. The best dumpling fillings are super incorporated, and you'll start noticing a white film on the bottom of your bowl, and that's when you know that it is good and mixed up. Now we're finally on to forming our dumplings. So you can be as creative and experimental as you want with this part. I just took a large chunk of the red dough, a smaller piece of the green dough, and started rolling this out into about a 3-inch disc. Remember, we want the edges thinner than the middle of the dumpling because these are going to get crimped and we don't want them to be too thick when they cook. Now we're adding our pork mixture. I think this is probably about a teaspoon. We don't want to overfill them because they will explode once we cook. And then you want to close this off any way you want to close off your dumpling. There's no rule to it. I'm just using crimps, but it should look like this. And again, experiment with your colors and your placement of where you put them. This is part of the fun, creative process of cooking, where you get to do what makes you happy. I've got to tell you that rolling all the dumplings took me a little over an hour. So if you have friends that would like to participate or your family members, this is a great project for everyone to do together. Or if you're by yourself, grab a seat and start rolling. Once all your dumplings are formed, we're going to put them on a parchment-lined baking sheet, and you can either cook these right away, or if you want to wait, you can pop this all in the freezer until they're completely frozen, and then put them in a Ziploc and save them for later. So over the stove, I'm using vegetable broth that I made from the scraps of that floral focaccia bread that we did a couple weeks ago. We're bringing the veggie broth to a boil. And then we're going to pop in our dumplings. And again, once they float, they should be cooked. I always do a sacrificial dumpling and pull it out to make sure the filling is cooked through, because you don't want to bite into a pork and chive dumpling that isn't cooked. Next up, we're gonna put our cooked dumplings on a plate. In hindsight, I should have used a larger plate, but I didn't. And then drizzle it with as much or as little chili oil as you like. If you have family members that don't like heat, you can put the chili oil in a side dish and serve it on the side for dipping. I tend to also serve this with a mix of soy and black vinegar in a small bowl. But there it is, my pork and chive tie-dyed dumplings. I think they're beautiful. I wish the color had stayed a little bit more intense, but I still really enjoy the way they turned out. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I really hope you try to make these. They're a little time consuming, but it's definitely worth it. If you liked this video, click the like button. If you loved it, subscribe, because I put out new videos every week. Until next time, happy cooking.